Before we begin, a warning. The following documentary discusses a high-profile criminal case involving extreme violence, domestic abuse, sexual assault, and murder. The details of this case are distressing and may be triggering for some viewers. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. Welcome to the platform. Please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Ashlyn Close is the kind of street where the biggest disturbance is usually the sound of a lawnmower or a barking dog. It is a quiet cul-de-sac in Bushey, Hertfordshire, a place where families settle for the peace. Among them were the Hunts, Carol, 61, Hannah, 28, Louise, 25. They were a family defined by a gentle heroism. At the center of the family was 61-year-old Carol Hunt. Friends described her as the meekest, gentlest human being you could ever meet. She was the glue that held the Hunt household together. Carol was married to veteran BBC commentator John Hunt, and together they raised 3 daughters in a home described as being filled with joy, color, and happiness. To those who knew her, Carol wasn't just a mother or a wife. She was a beautiful soul who spent her life looking after others. Then there was Hannah, the 28-year-old middle daughter. Hannah was a talented beautician and skin therapist. Her colleagues at the anti-aging clinic in Radlett described her as a fantastic therapist whose clients absolutely adored her. She was known for her infectious smile and her hard grafting work ethic. When people talk about Louise Hunt, the first thing they mention isn't the tragedy. It's her energy. At just 25 years old, Louise Hunt was the youngest daughter and was a true go-getter. While many people were just trying to figure out their next move during the pandemic, Louise was out in her family's garden in Bushey, building something of her own. She launched Groom & Glow, a dog grooming business that she ran out of a specialized pod right there on the property. If you lived in that neighborhood, you knew Louise. She was the bubbly, hard-working girl who was always greeted by wagging tails. Neighbors remember her as a caring, positive, and happy person, someone who genuinely loved what she did for a living. Their father, John Hunt, was the voice of British horse racing, a man whose career was spent narrating moments of triumph and speed. But on July 9th, 2024, the speed of life turned into a slow-motion nightmare. While John was away at work, a man the court would later describe as soaked in self-pity was methodically dismantling his world. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a 4-hour siege, orchestrated by a man who had successfully disguised himself as an ordinary human being for 18 months. To understand who Kyle Marcus Clifford was before the events of July 2024, it is necessary to look at a background marked by domestic instability, a troubled military career, and a family history of extreme violence. Born on April 5, 1998, in Enfield, North London, Clifford was the third of 4 siblings. His upbringing took place in an environment where violence was a recurring theme. Most notably, his older brother, Bradley Clifford, was already a notorious figure in the UK justice system. In 2018, Bradley was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum of 23 years, for the murder of an 18-year-old moped rider whom he chased and mowed down in a rage-filled car attack. During Kyle's trial, it was revealed that he remained in close contact with Bradley, even discussing weapons with him from prison the night before the Bushey murders. While Clifford did not have a long list of major convictions as the teen, he was known to police. Between 2012 and 2013, he was investigated for minor offenses including theft and cannabis possession. Peers from his youth described him as having a short temper and a history of bullying behaviors. Clifford joined the British Army in 2019, serving as a trooper in the Queen's Dragoon Guards, a cavalry regiment. However, his service was far from distinguished. His time in the military was marred by what supervisors called immaturity and a lack of discipline. In 2021, Clifford was involved in a serious alcohol-fueled altercation while on duty. This incident involved several soldiers drinking, followed by a violent confrontation, which significantly damaged his standing within the regiment. Military colleagues noted that Clifford often spoke about his brother Bradley with a sense of pride rather than shame, referring to the convicted murderer as a geezer, a slang term often used in a way that implies respect or toughness. He left the army in 2022 after roughly 2 years of service. He did not complete a full term and never saw active combat. Following his discharge, he worked briefly as a private security guard. During his 2025 trial, a clearer picture emerged of Clifford's mindset in the years leading up to the attack. Misogyny and radicalization. Investigators found that Clifford had become deeply immersed in manosphere content online. This included extensive consumption of videos by figures who promote aggressive, controlling views of women. He had dated Louise Hunt for a year and a half, but behind the scenes, he was a different man. He was controlling, arrogant, and had a nasty temper. Louise eventually found the courage to say, "Enough is enough," ending the relationship with what her father called textbook maturity. But for Clifford, rejection was a humiliation that required blood. He didn't just target Louise, he targeted the women who had supported her. Between June 28th and July 9th, Clifford prepared his murder kit. He wasn't a man in a blind rage, he was a consumer. He purchased a Horizon Cornet MXT 405 compound crossbow, a weapon capable of firing bolts at 400 feet per second. He bought a 10-inch butcher's knife, heavy-duty duct tape, rope and petrol cans. He even researched the weather for the day he planned to kill them, ensuring nothing would interfere with his mission. 1432. Clifford arrived at the Hunt home with a rucksack. He rang the bell and Carol Hunt, always compassionate, answered. He lied, saying he was there to return Louise's things. Carol let him in. Moments later, the doorbell camera recorded the sound of high-pitched screams. Clifford stabbed Carol to death in the hallway. 1507. After the first murder, Clifford stepped back outside to his car. He retrieved the crossbow, hiding it under a blanket, and went back inside. He knew the family routine. He knew Louise was working in the dog grooming outbuilding in the garden. He simply waited. When Louise finally entered the house, she was met with a scene from a horror film. For the next 2.5 hours, she was held captive. Clifford used the duct tape to bind and gag her. He then raped her, an act the prosecution called a violent sexual act of spite. 1731. In a moment of staggering coldness, Clifford took Louise's phone and texted John Hunt, asking, "What time are you home?" He was waiting for the final victims. Hannah returned home from work. She sensed something was wrong immediately. As she entered, Clifford shot Louise through the back with the crossbow. Hannah fled to a bedroom, barricading the door. With what the judge called amazing mental strength, she sent one final message to her partner. "Call police. Kyle here, tying us up." Clifford broke through the door and shot Hannah. Because of her quick thinking, the police were alerted and Clifford was forced to flee before John Hunt returned. Hannah's final act had likely saved her father's life. The manhunt lasted 22 hours. The entire country was on edge as Clifford disappeared into the Hertfordshire countryside. Finally, thermal imaging from a police helicopter picked up a heat signature in Lavender Hill Cemetery in Enfield. Armed officers closed in among the gravestones. Realizing his escape was gone, Clifford turned the crossbow on himself, firing a bolt into his own chest. He survived the self-inflicted wound, but his silence in the following months would be his final act of cowardice. The trial in early 2025 was a harrowing look into a broken mind. Clifford refused to even leave his cell at HMP Belmarsh to face the family. He pleaded guilty to the murders, but denied the rape of Louise. Forensic evidence demonstrated that Louise had also been raped by Clifford during the hours she was held captive. Despite the clear findings, Clifford denied the charge, claiming his DNA found at the scene was the result of consensual activity from their relationship, which had ended 2 weeks prior. The Crown Prosecution Service, however, was determined to ensure Clifford faced justice for this heinous act. They pushed the case to trial at Cambridge Crown Court. Using expert forensic analysis, the prosecution rubbished Clifford's claims of prior consent. They presented overwhelming evidence that the DNA was linked to the brutal events of July 9th, a violent sexual act of spite. As a result of the CPS's rigorous case, the jury saw through Clifford's lies. It took just 45 minutes of deliberation to find him guilty. On March 11, 2025, John Hunt stood in that courtroom and addressed the empty dock. His words were a masterclass in dignity and grief. He called Clifford a psychopath and said, "The screams of hell, Kyle, I can hear them faintly now. They are going to roll out the red carpet for you." At that point, when the person you could have been meets the person you are, you will realize your miserable fate. The judge, Mr. Justice Benathan, was equally scathing. He called Clifford a jealous man soaked in self-pity, who held women in utter contempt. He handed down a whole life order. In the British legal system, this is the ultimate end. No parole, no release. Kyle Clifford will die in a prison cell. The tragedy left a hole in the heart of the racing world, but it also changed the law. In 2025, the UK government introduced the Crime and Policing Bill, finally tightening the restrictions on crossbows, ensuring they are treated with the same gravity as firearms. But laws can only do so much. The true legacy of this case is found in the bravery of the Hunt family. John and his surviving daughter Amy released a statement saying they would always be a family of 5. John asked that women around the world take Louise's bravery as a shining beacon. The story of the Bushey murders is a dark one, but it is also a story of a family whose love was so strong that even a monster couldn't erase their light. Hannah showed unbelievable courage in her final moments. Even after being fatally injured, she managed to raise the alarm, an act of bravery that her father later said saved his own life. Her boyfriend, Alex, called her his angel and the brightest light in his life. The youngest daughter, 25-year-old Louise, was a young entrepreneur. During the pandemic, she turned her passion for animals into a thriving business called Groom & Glow, which she ran right from the family garden. She was courageous, bubbly, and supportive, a woman who adored her family and her work. In the weeks leading up to the tragedy, Louise showed a strength that her father wants the world to remember. She had ended a difficult relationship with a maturity and kindness that her family calls a shining beacon for other women. She even kept a list of red flags on her phone to remind herself why she deserved better. Her final social media post was a tribute to women who leave, showing that she was a woman who knew her worth. The women are survived by their father John and their sister Amy. In the face of unimaginable pain, John and Amy have chosen not to be defined by anger. John famously returned to his commentary box at Cheltenham just months later, telling the world he wanted to show real courage, inspired by his daughters. Together they launched the Hunt Family Fund. It's a charity designed to help and inspire young women, ensuring that the names Carol, Hannah, and Louise are forever associated with empowerment and joy rather than tragedy. As John beautifully put it in court, "You killed 3 beautiful mockingbirds, but their music will never stop." The story of the Hunt family is a reminder of the power of love over hate. If you'd like to support the causes they cared about, you can look into the Hunt Family Fund. Let's remember them not for how they died, but for the incredible lives they lived. Thank you for tuning in to the platform. Please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe.